You know the scene. One of the children on your bus gets sick or has an accident and gets a cut. And what do you do when this happens? Remember, do the right thing and care for others are two of Laidlaw's guiding principles. So your first responsibility is to take care of the child. But when you do, you also have to protect yourself and the child from infection. And after you've attended to the child and are cleaning up the scene, you'll use special precautions as well. Precautions that help prevent you from coming into contact with bloodborne pathogens. That's what you'll learn in this program. So pay close attention, because doing so will reduce your risk of exposure to bloodborne pathogens and will protect you and your passengers too. So if you're ready, we can begin. You probably think your job at Laidlaw is cut and dry. You know what to expect on a day-to-day basis. You come to work, you drive your route, and then you go home. Everyone is happy. No one ever gets hurt, and you never deal with a crisis, or heaven forbid, a life-threatening emergency. So you must be wondering,
what's all this fuss about bloodborne pathogens?
What the heck does that have to do with my job?
Well, no matter how well your day is going or how well you do your job, accidents can happen. And when an accident causes an injury and you have to perform first aid or clean up a mess, you're at risk for exposure to bloodborne pathogens. This course will teach you how to protect yourself against exposure and what to do in case you should become exposed. The first step towards protecting yourself from exposure to bloodborne pathogens is to know what they are. Bloodborne pathogens are microorganisms that can cause some pretty serious diseases. Diseases like HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and hepatitis. Bloodborne pathogens live and breed in a person's blood and in certain body fluids, such as semen and vaginal secretions, amniotic fluid in pregnant women, and any body fluid or body part that is visibly contaminated with blood or body fluids. Well, we hope you won't have to worry about that since you transport children, but you definitely have to worry about blood and vomit. So let's learn about some diseases you can contract from bloodborne pathogens. There are hundreds of diseases that can live and grow in a person's bloodstream. These range from the common cold to venereal disease to the bubonic plague. Obviously, some are more dangerous than others. We're going to focus on a couple of very dangerous bloodborne pathogens that you could possibly be exposed to at work. These are HIV, AIDS, and a few different strains of hepatitis. AIDS stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, an incurable disease that is caused by the HIV virus. HIV/AIDS has no discernible symptoms in its early stages. As the disease progresses, symptoms intensify and an infected person becomes weak and incapacitated. HIV/AIDS eventually causes death. There are no vaccines currently available to make you immune to HIV. However, there are drugs that can prolong and improve an infected person's life. Everyone has heard of AIDS through movies, television, and newspapers, and many people are afraid of the disease because they don't know enough about it. But this fear is irrational because you can't accidentally pick up AIDS. You can't get it by using a public phone or bathroom or by sharing a taxi. You can only be infected with the HIV virus by coming into direct contact with the blood or body fluids of an infected person through your eyes, mouth, other mucous membranes, open wounds, or through intimate sexual contact with an infected person.
Mucous membrane? What the heck's that?
A mucous membrane is the moist skin lining the eyes, nose, mouth, and throat. HBV is the acronym for the hepatitis B virus, which causes the most common strain of hepatitis. Hepatitis is an inflammation of the liver. There are 3 strains of hepatitis, A, B, and C. Depending upon the strain, the disease can be mild and brief, or it can be long-term, debilitating, and even fatal in some cases. Take, for example, hepatitis B. It can develop into chronic liver disease, cirrhosis, or liver cancer if not properly treated early on. And just like AIDS, hepatitis B has no discernible symptoms in the early stages, and it can be transmitted by direct contact with blood or body fluids. But unlike the HIV virus, it can also be transmitted by some types of casual contact, such as kissing, because hepatitis B is transmitted by saliva. There is a vaccine to prevent hepatitis B, and treatment is available if you contract the disease. You should also know about hepatitis A, formerly known as infectious hepatitis. It's a mild and infrequent form of the disease. Hepatitis A can be transmitted through contaminated feces and occasionally by syringes and emergency equipment that have been contaminated by the virus. But the good news is there's a vaccine to prevent hepatitis A and post-exposure treatment. Unfortunately, you won't fare so well with hepatitis C, the deadliest of the three strains. Approximately 50% of all people infected develop chronic liver disease. 10 to 20% of them get cirrhosis or liver cancer. Hepatitis C can be transmitted by contact with blood and some body fluids, but not by saliva. There's no vaccine or cure for hepatitis C at this time. Your chances of being exposed to HIV at work are slim. There's more of a chance that you would be exposed to HBV, but that's pretty unlikely too. Exposure happens when you come into direct contact with the blood or other potentially infectious fluids of an infected person. But always remember, exposure is not infection. You can only become infected if your bodily fluids mix with the infected person's bodily fluids. That means that their fluids have to come in contact with your eyes, your nose, your mouth, other mucous membranes, or open wounds, or you have to have intimate sexual contact with an infected person. So how do you avoid something you can't see? The answer is universal precautions. Universal precautions simply means you automatically assume every drop of blood or other potentially infectious material is definitely infected. So you protect yourself no matter what the situation. Imagine this. A child falls on your bus and gets a cut. Now, what should you do in this situation? Should you clean the wound with your bare hands? Absolutely not. So stop now and discuss possible courses of action. In this situation, you'll administer basic first aid, using all of the precautions necessary to protect yourself from exposure. Unfortunately, performing first aid automatically puts you at risk for exposure to HIV and hepatitis. On or off the job, practice first aid safely. Always use the appropriate personal protection equipment, such as disposable latex gloves, whenever you perform first aid or clean up after an accident. Proper personal protection equipment puts a barrier between you and blood or other potentially infectious fluids. All of our buses are equipped with first aid kits and may have cleanup kits, which include the disposable latex gloves. Disposable latex gloves are the first line of defense against bloodborne pathogens. They should be used when treating a sick or injured person. And gloves not only protect you, but they protect the child too. Gloves are only useful if they prevent blood or other infectious fluids from directly touching your bare hands. Always inspect gloves before you put them on. If they're cracked or torn in any way, throw them away immediately and get another pair. If you are allergic to latex gloves, hypoallergenic or powder-free gloves are available. Just ask your supervisor. Remember, gear up before you go to assist the injured child. Many well-meaning people make the mistake of not putting on protective gloves until they're actually working on the patient, and that puts them at risk of exposure. When you're finished with the gloves, carefully remove them so you don't contaminate yourself or spread contamination. And dispose of them properly in a biohazard materials bag, which should be in the cleanup kit. If it's impossible to wash your hands immediately, wipe them thoroughly with a disinfectant towelette and wash with soap and warm water as soon as possible. As you can see, latex gloves are your defense against exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Always use gloves when attending to an injured person. And be careful not to contaminate yourself when removing the gloves. Removing gloves can be tricky, so let's review the steps closely. Peel off the first glove, being careful not to contaminate any bare skin. Hold the first glove with your remaining gloved hand. Now, take your index finger, put it under the second glove and fold it back. Grab the glove from the inside with your thumb and forefinger and pull off the second glove with the first one. Dispose of both gloves in a red biohazard container. Stop now and practice using latex gloves. After you've taken care of the injured person, you have to clean up the accident scene, also called the exposure site. And you'll want to do this as soon as possible. If your bus has a cleanup kit, it contains gloves and a disposable scraper and may include a red biohazard waste bag and disinfectant towelettes. Wear gloves while cleaning an exposure site. Use the scraper to clean up any broken glass or bits of metal. Do not try to clean up sharp objects with your hands. Sharp objects may puncture the gloves, and that exposes you to bloodborne pathogens all over again. So use something other than your hands to pick up sharp objects. Dispose of any materials from the exposure site and the products you use to clean up the accident, as well as your gloves, in the red biohazard bag. And put all sharp objects in a puncture-proof biohazard container. As soon as you complete your shift, report the incident so the bus can be thoroughly cleaned. If you do become exposed, don't panic. Remain calm and report the incident to your supervisor. Provide as much detail as possible when reporting the exposure, such as the child's name, address, and school, how the incident occurred, who else was involved, etc. Follow the instructions your supervisor gives you. In the extremely remote case that exposure does occur, you'll have the option of having a blood test and a serologic test for HIV. If you decline the HIV test, your blood will be stored for 90 days should you change your mind. The doctor will try to get written consent to have the child tested as well. The results of your test will be reported to you, and you'll discuss treatment plans if necessary with the doctor. All records are kept confidential. We don't want to frighten you, but bloodborne pathogens are serious business and a real risk to you. That's why Laidlaw has an exposure control plan. This training session is part of the plan, which can be found in the Driver Development and Safety Department, along with OSHA's bloodborne pathogens regulations. So, if you have questions or need a refresher course, don't hesitate to consult the plan.
I was parked outside a museum, waiting for a field trip to finish, and one of the teachers brought a young boy to the bus who wasn't feeling well, and asked if he could rest on the bus. Well, of course, I said yes. And about 10 minutes later, the little boy began to vomit, not only on the bus seat, and on himself, but on me. My first thought was to grab the boy and get him off the bus. And then I remembered to take universal precautions. I didn't move him, but I did put on latex gloves before I went to help him.
This was a real mess. A little girl made a pretty piece of stained glass in art class. She fell getting on the bus and cut her hand pretty badly. She was pretty upset, but I stopped the bleeding and her mom took her to the emergency room for stitches.
One of my kids urinated on himself and the floor while I was securing his wheelchair. Well, I was pretty worried because urine is a bodily fluid and it was pretty messy. And I had other kids on the bus who I didn't want to expose. So I grabbed my cleanup kit, put on my gloves, and cleaned up the accident as quickly as possible. I then put everything in a biohazard bag. Now, obviously, I didn't have soap and water on the side of the road, so I used a disinfectant towelette to clean my hands. I really felt sorry for the kid, but he couldn't help it. And I assured him that this happens to anyone, and I treated him with dignity.